As the United Nations Security Council prepares to meet to discuss Lebanon, tensions remain high despite the ceasefire agreement between Israel and Lebanon. While the Lebanese government is hopeful that Israel will withdraw from southern Lebanon by the end of the 60-day deadline, Israeli violations of the ceasefire continue to undermine trust. The United States have promised that Israel will withdraw by the deadline. Will Israel honor its commitment to withdraw? And can the international community exert enough pressure to hold Israel accountable? Welcome to In Depth.
كل المستهدفين هن مدنيين.
وضع شيء مرعب، شيء بخوف.
The United Nations Security Council is holding a closed session on Lebanon to review the progress of the United States and French brokered ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah. The agreement that was effective on November the 27th ended 30 months of conflict, with the Israeli military withdrawing from south of Lebanon of the Blue Line and Lebanese forces deploying south of the Litani. Members are expected to welcome the reduced violence and urge full implementation of the deal.
Once again, Israeli occupation forces continue violating the ceasefire agreement with Lebanon, which officially went into effect on November 27th. According to Lebanese media, Israeli warplanes carried out 4 new attacks in the early hours of today on the areas between the suburbs of Al Fouqa and Deir al-Zahrati in southern Lebanon. Further strikes were reported near the village of Janta in the Bekaa Valley. This pattern of aggression contradicts the very essence of the ceasefire, which was designed to foster an environment of security and cooperation. The situation escalated over the weekend when an Israeli drone reportedly launched 2 guided missiles at a vehicle in Bein Jabil, sending shockwaves through the surrounding villages as the explosions rang out. Even more alarmingly, explosions were heard in Ait Shab, where Israeli forces bombarded residential areas. Meanwhile, the UN Security Council is holding a meeting to discuss the implementation of the ceasefire agreement. France has called for the meeting to seek updates on the withdrawal of Israeli forces and the deployment of Lebanese troops before the ceasefire's expiration. The ceasefire deal, due to expire on January 26th, gave Israel 60 days to pull its forces out of occupied areas and hand over control to the Lebanese army and UN peacekeepers. Despite the terms of the agreement, Israeli forces are intensifying their violations, raising urgent questions about the future of ceasefire in Lebanon.
And for further analysis, we're joined from Beirut by Fawzi Boudieb, a writer and political analyst at Al-Anba electronic newspaper, and from Cairo by Dr. Ashraf Al-Ashri, editorial director of Al-Ahram daily newspaper. Welcome to Qnews and a very warm welcome to our program. And we start off with Dr. Fawzi. And of course, sir, it's worth to mention how significant is the upcoming UN Security Council meeting for Lebanon, especially in terms of monitoring the implementation of the ceasefire agreement between Lebanon and Israel. And sir, do you foresee that a ceasefire will be implemented in the near future?
Good evening. Thank you very much for having me. Of course, the Security Council meeting is related to the ceasefire agreement through the international resolutions, which the ceasefire agreement is based on, which is determined for 60 days as a first phase that will end in 15 days approximately. the recent resolution of the Security Council, or the 2006 resolution for the ceasefire. A committee was formed to monitor the implementation of this resolution. A French officer and a U.S. officer to monitor the implementation of this resolution. We are hopeful for the continuation of this ceasefire, but we witnessed a lot of Israeli violations to this resolutions, which affects the future of a ceasefire. That's why the Security Council should take decisive steps to stop Israel from making these violations.
We move on to Mr. Ashri. Welcome to the program, and I'd like to ask you, sir. Amos Hochstein recently assured Lebanese officials that the Israeli occupation army would withdraw from southern Lebanon by January the 26th. Do you believe Israel will stick to this timeline, or is this just another tactic to delay a full withdrawal, sir?
Absolutely. If there is an international resolution by the Security Council, there must be decisive moves and what Israel is doing now is a message that Israel wants this Israeli occupation in southern Lebanon to continue for a long time. Even the Hebrew media sent a lot of negative messages conveying that Israel has reported to the American U.S. administration that it's not willing to extend the ceasefire further, but everything now is leading to the Israeli desire to continue the occupation of southern Lebanon, as what has been done in Syria recently. Now we're also witnessing these violations in the West Bank in the framework of the Netanyahu project to occupy the entire Middle East. Once Trump assumes office, a lot of things will change. We have a lot of concerns that Netanyahu actually wants to resort to military force to obtain broader territories with the U.S. support, especially that the U.S. convoy last week stressed the Israeli will to withdraw in 60 days, but all the indicators that say otherwise, and that they want to continue the Israeli violations as what happened yesterday, targeting some regions in southern Lebanon, with the excuse that they suspected some movements from armed groups in southern Lebanon. They are placing pressure on the Trump administration even before assuming office and taking the White House.
Okay, we move on to Mr. Boudieb. How do you assess the role of France and the United States in facilitating the ceasefire? Do you think their involvement is enough to ensure Israel's full withdrawal from southern Lebanon as promised, sir?
Of course, this involvement is not enough. We require the bringing back the international emergency forces to be deployed again in all Lebanese regions, and intensifying efforts in the southern to prevent Israel from practicing this systematic destruction process on the Lebanese borders. It is the Security Council mission to sponsor this agreement and to ensure its complete implementation. Otherwise, we will see again Israel occupying some Lebanese regions. Once again, an occupation for the Lebanese country, for the Lebanese state.
Mr. Ashri, what are the main challenges Lebanon faces in securing the implementation of the ceasefire and ensuring that the IOF's withdrawal is not delayed or hindered?
what we've seen in the Joseph Aoun speech in his when he assumed office, to protect southern Lebanon by redeploying the Lebanese forces and taking control again of weaponizing forces, and to stop Netanyahu attempts to occupy southern Lebanon. So the political will represented in President Joseph Aoun to obtain the logistic aid to militarize again the Lebanese official forces will play an integral role to stop Netanyahu from occupying the Lebanese southern for a further period, and preventing Hezbollah also from committing any violations. The neighboring countries in the Arab world and in Europe are practicing pressure now on Netanyahu to stop the violations in southern Lebanon and to letting the Lebanese army to carry out its mission and be redeployed in the Ghitani region to achieve the Security Council resolution. And this also depends on the Trump role that is going to be played to convince Israel to completely withdraw from this region. And it will be an Arab incubator, an Arab, US, and European incubator to reinforce the Lebanese army force and achieve the Security Council resolution as it is required.
Okay, Mr. Boudieb, the UN Security Council is closely monitoring the situation between Lebanon and Israel. What do you think Israel's strategy will be as the 60-day deadline approaches for withdrawing from southern Lebanon?
Israel is taking an excuse of having saying that there is the Hezbollah groups in the southern Lebanese region, and today the army is heading to take control over some border villages, but Israel carried out military maneuvers to stop the Lebanese army from taking control over these villages. The fact is that there was no Hezbollah whatsoever in this region. Israel is only trying to provide some excuses to extend their presence in southern Lebanon. And it's not enough for President Trump to send a letter to Netanyahu requesting a ceasefire in Lebanon and Gaza and stop taking moves in Syria. What's required is the complete withdrawal gradually for the Israeli occupation forces, so that the Lebanese army is able to take control over these villages and border regions. The international sponsors as well should practice pressure on Israel to stop exploiting the infrastructure regions on the borders. We have 12 southern villages that were completely destroyed to stop citizens from going back to their lands and homes. These violations are grave violations to international laws and the agreement and the ceasefire agreement. That's why the Security Council is required to move the emergency forces in southern Lebanon to be deployed in their previous regions, supporting the Lebanese army as discussed to be completely deployed, and moving 15,000 fighters from middle Lebanon to southern Lebanon, and practice pressure on Israel to stop these violations, these daily violations that only target extending the ceasefire period to stay in the southern Lebanon region, as we listen from statement from Israeli officials that Israel is not willing to withdraw from the border villages. We've also seen statements by Israeli officials that Israel will centralize in 3 points in southern Lebanon: Talat al-Hamamis and Maroun Arad, and one more region. These statements are very concerning, showing that the Israeli intention is not to extend the ceasefire, it's to extend the occupation of southern Lebanon, which is a violation to the Lebanese integrity and sovereignty.
Mr. Al-Ashri, how do you explain Israel's continued violations of the ceasefire agreement, despite the promises made by the Israeli government and the international community? Not to mention that our other guest now mentioned that there are 3 regions in Lebanon that Israel intends to extend its occupation in, which is very unprecedented and very awkward in light of all the pressure and international community pressure from everywhere, sir, and of course the United States and France that are brokering this ceasefire. Your comments, sir, and your narrative.
This stresses the Netanyahu and Israel intention to not respect the international legitimacy and the Israeli non-commitment to international resolutions, because there is a high degree of there is a high desire by Netanyahu to increase the tension in the region since the Gaza events till now, passing through Syria, Lebanon, and Netanyahu has succeeded to change the current arena in the Middle East, in different regions in the Middle East, hoping to have a U.S. cover in the framework of this new administration coming, that is, as both administrations, Netanyahu and Trump, have a high degree of understanding. The new president of Lebanon, Joseph Aoun, will play an integral role completely eliminate the Hezbollah power in Lebanon, after succeeding in eliminating the first line of Hezbollah defense, and they have been bragging about this ever since. They now taking control over the West Bank, the Syrian lands, after occupying 60 kilometers of the Syrian integrity. They are repeating the scene again in southern Lebanon without any regard to international resolution, international legitimacy, as Netanyahu still has a political cover represented in Trump and the U.S. administration. That's why we need a new vision in the Lebanese government represented in the new president, and we need pressure from the international community to force Netanyahu and Israel to commit to the international resolutions and to the ceasefire agreement withdrawing from Lebanon by January 26th, respecting the Lebanese army being redeployed all over the Lebanese territories, and respecting the Security Council resolution in this regard. Now we are very hopeful that the new Lebanese administration will be able to do that, and we're hopeful that the international community will practice the required pressure, helping the Lebanese army to be redeployed once again all over the Lebanese land.
Okay, Mr. Boudieb, giving the talks seen has promised that the Israeli forces will withdraw by the end of the 60-day period, which of course the answers of both guests mean that it's not going to happen yet, and we're going to witness and see what's going to take place. To what extent can the US influence Israeli policy? And could Israel stay in Lebanon despite the American pledge? And sir, the role, of course, of the new Lebanese president, Joseph Aoun, in all these ongoing, sir, of course, Joseph Aoun is worth to mention that he has, like our guest just mentioned, he has to have a role in all of this that's happening now, and that we should reach a consensus as soon as possible.
The United States of America has a great ability to pressure Israel and to achieve the ceasefire agreement as required, withdrawing from Lebanese land in 60 days in January 26th. For President Joseph Aoun, the president who assumed office 2 days ago, to fill his responsibility and perform the military role, redeploying the Lebanese army. Now we see Hezbollah committing to the ceasefire and handing over different villages, cooperating with the Lebanese administration, but the Israeli violations hinders these handover stages greatly. Joseph Aoun announced that there's only the Lebanese army will be holding weapons, and all other militias, all other weaponized groups will either hand over their weapons or join the Lebanese army under a legitimate framework.
Yes, sir. This was not my this was not my question. My question was the role of Joseph Aoun in this ceasefire, sir, not handling or the Lebanese army, where the ongoings of the Lebanese army. Of course, we all know that Joseph Aoun comes from a very a very strong military background, and of course, we all know that he has very good international relations with all the partners. Where is the role of Joseph Aoun in this ceasefire that does not want to take place at this point because of Israel?
Yesterday he was the field operator overseeing the ceasefire process, and today he's leading the entire country, supervising the ceasefire agreement and committing to this ceasefire, and therefore he gives instructions to all forces committing to the ceasefire items and but it's not only about the Lebanese army, it's also the Israeli side that is still violating the ceasefire on a daily basis. We need Israel to
Got your
stop.
point, sir. I'll be back again, Mr. El Ashri. Considering the ongoing violations and the international pressure on Israel, do you believe the ceasefire will hold in the long term, or are we likely to see another escalation between Israel and Lebanon?
I think it will be very hard to go back to military confrontation between Hezbollah and Israel, especially after what happened in the past 26 months, but we will see a cool down settlements, giving an opportunity to President Aoun. Also, Netanyahu will keep threatening with military operations, but the Lebanese army will be deployed once again and will present assurances and guarantees to the international community to stop any kind of terrorist threats.
That was Ashraf Al-Ashri, editorial director at Al-Ahram daily newspaper, and Fawzi Boudieb, writer and political analyst at Al-Anba electronic newspaper. Thank you very much for your insights and your valuable knowledge. And here the question will remain in our program today until the 26th of January. Will Israel honor its commitment to withdraw? That brings us to the end of today's episode of In Depth. Thanks for watching and stay tuned for more updates. Thank you.